Hello everyone. Today I would like to show you the Furilabs FLH1. It is a Displaylink Hub for the Furilabs phones, which allows you to have a full desktop experience using your phone. This time I will skip the fake unboxing as it is not very interesting. In the box you only get the hub itself, a short USB-C to C cable and no power supply. Just to start with the specs of the hub. It has one USB-A port, in total 4 USB-C ports, one of which however is reserved for power delivery and the other one for the phone itself, of course. Then we also have one mini HDMI, an Ethernet port and a full-size HDMI on the back side. Oh, and of course also the headphone jack on the front. And the front USB-C port is also the one reserved for plugging the phone in. Currently, the hub can only handle one display output at a time, even though it has 2 outputs. And as mentioned, it is a Displaylink hub, so it has a little processor inside, which is the Displaylink DP6950. And the hub costs around $90 at the moment. Now, with that out of the way, let me tell you something about the build quality before finally plugging it in. It does feel very solid overall. It has a sturdy base and the arm itself is made from metal. The whole thing therefore feels very weighty and I'd say almost premium. The upper hinge is a little stiff for my liking. It makes it sometimes a little hard to adjust the angle when the phone is inside. But overall, it still feels pretty good. And what I have to say, the rotating mechanism of the base has a very satisfying sound to it. So now that we have checked this off, we can finally move on to plugging in our hub. For this, I took my Steam Deck power supply and plugged it into the right side of the hub, which is USB-C reserved for power delivery as we already had, and the little USB-C to C cable in front for the phone, and also on the back our HDMI and the Logitech dongle in the single USB-A port. So now that we can plug our phone in, we have to open the external display app and enable our display services. Once the app has realized that we're plugged in now. And in a couple of seconds, you should be able to see our Gnome Desktop come up on the monitor. There it is. Oh, and one thing I forgot. We also have to forward our input devices, and in this case we only have our Logitech wireless keyboard, so we enable that with this check mark, and now we can use it on the Gnome Desktop. So that already brings us to the incredible things about this hub in combination with the Furilabs phones, or in this case the FLX1S particularly. We can just run a full Gnome Desktop on our phone, which I think is pretty amazing. We can just open whatever app we like. Of course, it's not as quick as a regular desktop PC, but I think it's still perfectly usable for light office or web browsing stuff. And now we can just search something to show it's actually working. And of course, do a lot of stuff that we couldn't do on, let's say, Android with Samsung Dex, for example. Like you just saw, I just opened a regular Zen browser, which is a kind of customized Firefox, but that is of course a very basic functionality. You can install loads of Linux applications in the Debian or Flatpak packaging formats, like you can see here in my app drawer. Theoretically, you could even run Steam on the phone, since with the upcoming Steam Frame, there's a ARM64 native Steam client available now, but I couldn't really get this to work in any meaningful way, but maybe that's something for a future video. And of course, you can do more specific stuff you wouldn't be able to do on Android, as I already said, like running Gnome Builder, for example, and do some coding stuff. Or you could also, of course, open up the software center if it loads up eventually and install your favorite Linux compatible software like LibreOffice or maybe even Gimp, whatever you desire. That of course also means you get Gnome's workspace management, and even though you might say it's pretty basic, you also get of course the tiling features. Or you could open up your terminal and do whatever you want in this. So the point I'm trying to make is you can just do pretty much anything you want. You could also do on a regular Linux PC with this setup, which is pretty cool and of course offers a lot of variety you wouldn't get on more mainstream platforms. But unfortunately, that does not mean there are no issues at all. And I think there are right now at least some issues I would consider pretty catastrophic for the mainstream success of this product. So let's start with the most obvious thing. As I already told you in the beginning, this is a Displaylink Hub, which means it is very specific to this phone. This phone could theoretically work with other hubs, and this hub could theoretically work with other Displaylink capable devices. But to ensure the compatibility you'd want for such a solution, these two devices are just tailored for each other, which is unfortunate maybe. That also means it is maybe not really comparable to something like Samsung Dex, because of course Samsung Dex can just work on anything you plug your phone in, which is a DisplayPort over USB-C capable for most devices. This, however, won't work with this device, or this combination of devices rather, because software and the hub itself have to play together to enable this experience. And another limitation I think that can really be fixed with this particular device, the Furilabs FLX1S, so the phone part of this whole equation, is that this device has a USB 2 port that drastically limits the speed of the display connection, which means you have very visible compression artifacts on the screen. And very visible is maybe a little bit exaggerated. It is definitely usable, but if you're looking for it, you can pretty quickly find it. So these are already, in my opinion, two most severe issues with this combination of devices. And I have some more, but they are maybe less severe and also most likely fixable by the Furilabs team in the future. And before I go on to complain even more, I just want to say very few people at Furilabs working on this device or these devices are doing an incredible job in my opinion. And they are also very active in the Telegram/Matrix chat room to answer questions of users, things along those lines. But now to continue complaining, there are numerous little other issues which probably will be fixed in the near future, but still they are present now, so I'm going to mention them. So first of all, something I didn't really mention before, we have the option to set our display resolution here. And as you hopefully can see in the video, we are currently running at 720p, which is of course not ideal for even a 24-inch screen. And that stems from the fact that if I change this to 1080p, we can do this right now. We just have to restart the display services. The screen just become very, very laggy. Maybe you can even see it just in the overview animation of Gnome already. You might be able to see it even when switching the app pages. And this does get even worse when opening some apps. And try the Send browser again. So now I'm back on the Furilabs page, and while this was fairly smoothly before, you can definitely start to notice some stuttering now. And this is even visible when watching YouTube videos, which is of course annoying. I didn't really have an issue using a 720p over the past few weeks, but of course this isn't ideal, as even 1080p isn't that high of a resolution for today's standards. That stuttering and lagginess I showed you might also be due to the fact that I'm pretty sure the Gnome session is not hardware accelerated yet, because the phone is running FOSH and the desktop session is running Gnome, and they do actually use two different compositors under the hood, even though they share, of course, many similarities visually, which does contribute to even some apps not running which require hardware acceleration. For example, I tried doing some video editing on the phone, but Kdenlive doesn't even launch, unfortunately. So there are some issues like that. But as I said, I'm pretty sure the hardware acceleration can be fixed. I'm not so sure how much the USB 2 port of the phone is impacting this performance at 1080p though. So maybe this cannot even be fully fixed. And another thing to complain about, I didn't show you this previously, but I have this little coffee mug in my quick settings, which makes the phone not go to sleep. And I always enable this when using external display services or the app to start a Gnome session on the monitor. Because if the phone goes to sleep, all but one of the efficiency cores of the SoC in the phone go to sleep as well, which means the performance is absolutely unusable. I can show you this right now. I will turn this off and just turn the screen off manually. And I press the Windows key or the super key on my keyboard around 5 seconds before you saw the animation play. I can show you again. So this is absolutely unusable, and as soon as I turn the screen back on, it's okay, at least for the 1080p showcase right now. Of course, this is just a minor thing they can fix pretty easily, I assume, or I hope so. But still, another thing I noticed while using it. And also another thing, which I cannot show you right now as I only have my Logitech keyboard, but if I use my regular keyboard and mouse, I have to use an additional USB hub, because of course Furilabs Hub only has one USB-A port. That's not a huge deal. Of course, I've been using that hub before anyway with the Steam Deck dock. But what I have noticed is if I have this hub plugged in while or before I'm trying to enable the display services, it often freaks out and just thinks it's enabled, but no image actually gets displayed on the monitor. And if it enters that state where it thinks the display services are active, but no connection actually happens, and if you turn it back off, the phone just crashes and reboots. So there's definitely some weird things going on with that Displaylink app on the phone. But as I said previously about the other issue, I think these are very minor fixes in the grand scheme of things. So unfortunately, I'm still not done complaining. There are a few more things. For example, the Gnome session unfortunately does not support extensions, which especially for Gnome is a little unfortunate. This is one thing. Then there's also the thing about keyboard layouts. Even though I've set it to German and right now it seems to work, it just sometimes decides to switch back for some reason or doesn't work depending on the keyboard. Maybe that also has something to do with my USB hub issue I mentioned previously. And now my last point is, if you open an app that is running in the background, for example, like the app for connecting to my Pine Time, if you open this in Gnome session, it just opens on the phone, as you can see. So apps that are running in the background won't open in the Gnome session. You have to kill them from Task Manager or some other way, and then they will open in the Gnome session. I'm pretty sure they already acknowledged that and have a fix for that, but right now it's still the case. But now, after complaining for about half the video, I want to it up. And I'll have to say, even though there are a lot of issues I just mentioned, overall, I still have to say I think this is a very cool showcase of what can be possible with a Linux phone. And of course, if you're willing to make trade-offs of daily driving a Linux phone in some areas, this could be a big strong point. But as I explained in the previous minutes of me complaining, there are still some issues, some which will most likely be ironed out in the next few weeks and months, but unfortunately some which probably won't be, like for example USB 2 bottleneck on the phone, which also brings me to the Samsung Dex comparison, if I'm actually gonna put this in the title of the video. But of course, Samsung Dex, even though it has the limitation of running Android, it of course is a much more mature and polished experience. And not only that, it is of course also much more universal because you don't have to buy a specific Displaylink dock for your device, but you also have to give Furilabs teams some slack. Even, for example, if you look at the Google Pixel desktop mode, how rudimentary that is, and there's a billion, if not trillion-dollar company behind it. And I think even though there are some issues which might be deal breaker for a lot of people, I think it's cool to see what's possible, and I hope they will keep improving. So now these were my 2 cents to the Furilabs FLH1 Displaylink Hub. I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe I'll see you next time.